I loved my wife deeply. She was truly the light of my life, and every morning I would wake up with her face in my heart. People say love fades after marriage, but for me, it grew stronger every day. I would often sit quietly and watch her, the way her hair would fall across her face, the way she would smile softly while talking to herself in the kitchen. Everything about her seemed like a prayer answered. We had been married for only 2 years, but in those 2 years, I had seen every shade of life with her. Laughter, tears, small fights, and even those silent nights when we would just lie next to each other without saying a word. Yet everything was said. That morning was just like any other, or so I thought. The sunlight was filtering through the curtains, and she was standing by the mirror, adjusting her dupatta. She looked so calm, so content, that I didn't say anything at first. But something inside me felt strange, a quiet unease that I couldn't name. "Where are you going all dressed up like this?" I asked lightly, with a half smile on my face. She turned to look at me, and that single glance stayed with me forever. There was a softness in her eyes, but also something distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere else. "I just felt like getting ready today," she said. "No reason, really." I smiled and walked toward her, wrapping my arms around her from behind. "When you look this beautiful, there's always a reason," I whispered against her hair. She laughed gently and placed her hand over mine. Her perfume, that same jasmine scent I had given her on our first anniversary, filled the air. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. "Let's go out tonight," I said suddenly. "Dinner, maybe a long drive. It's been so long since we've done that." She hesitated. "Tonight? I don't know." "Come on," I said softly, turning her to face me. "You've been busy for weeks. I want you to myself tonight." She smiled faintly, but her eyes looked sad, almost like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and said, "Don't think too much. Just say yes." She nodded slowly. "All right. Tonight, if only I had known that tonight would be the last time I'd ever see her alive." Evening came faster than usual. The sky outside had turned golden, and the city lights began to flicker one by one. She wore a soft maroon dress, simple, yet she looked breathtaking. I remember staring at her for a long time as she adjusted her earrings in the mirror. "You're staring again," she said with a teasing smile. "I have every right to," I replied. "You're my wife, not a stranger." She laughed softly. That laugh I would later hear in my dreams, echoing in empty rooms. We left home around 8. I drove slowly, not wanting the night to end too soon. She sat beside me, looking out the window, her hair fluttering with the wind. The radio played an old romantic song, and for a few moments, it felt like time had stopped. When we reached the restaurant, it wasn't crowded. Just a few tables were occupied. We sat near the window. I ordered her favorite dish, and while waiting, we talked about small things. Our home, my work, the upcoming family gathering. But her voice seemed softer than usual, and she kept avoiding my eyes. "Is something wrong?" I finally asked. She shook her head. "No, not really. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" She smiled faintly. "About life. About how quickly everything changes." Her words puzzled me, but I didn't press. Sometimes silence says more than words. Dinner arrived. She ate little, just picking at her food. Halfway through, she excused herself to go to the washroom. When she returned, her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. My heart sank. What happened? I asked in alarm. Nothing, she said, forcing a smile. Just got something in my eye. But I knew she was lying. My wife could hide anything from the world, but not from me. We finished dinner quietly. On our way back, she rested her head against the window, watching the passing lights. I reached over and took her hand. It was cold, unusually cold. Are you okay? I whispered. She nodded but didn't speak. The silence between us grew heavier, like a secret pressing on the air. When we reached home, she walked straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I followed, confused and worried. Please tell me what's wrong, I said, kneeling in front of her. Tears welled up in her eyes. Nothing is wrong, she whispered. I just want you to promise me something. What promise? If anything ever happens to me, she said slowly, don't blame yourself. And don't let my memory hurt you. I froze. Why would you even say that? She smiled sadly, brushing away a tear. Sometimes love means letting go of pain before it arrives. That night, I held her close until we both fell asleep. I didn't know it would be the last night she'd ever fall asleep in my arms. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently into the room, painting everything gold. The air felt unusually still, not silent, but heavy, as if something inside the house had changed. I turned over lazily, expecting to see her asleep beside me, her hair scattered over the pillow like every morning, but the bed was empty. At first, I thought she must be in the kitchen. She loved making breakfast early, humming softly to herself as she worked. Smiling to the thought, I got up and walked out, still half asleep. Zoya! I called out softly. No answer. I checked the kitchen. Empty. The stove was cold. The teacups were untouched. My smile began to fade. Zoya! I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. A strange unease gripped me. I walked toward the veranda, the garden, even the small storeroom. She wasn't there. Everything in the house was in its place, yet it felt lifeless, hollow. Then my eyes fell on the small wooden table near the window. A folded letter lay on top of it, her handwriting instantly recognizable. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It began simply, "If you are reading this, it means I couldn't stay anymore." My breath caught. The words blurred before my eyes. Please forgive me. This isn't your fault. You gave me everything, love, care, a home I could never have dreamed of. But there's a storm inside me that I can't silence anymore. I tried, believe me, I tried so hard to fight it. But the voices don't stop. I sank to the floor, reading every word with my heart breaking apart. You once told me that if ever life becomes too heavy, I should let it go. So I'm letting go, my love. Don't search for me. Don't cry for me. Just remember that I loved you more than words can say. The letter ended without a signature, only a small pressed jasmine flower taped to the bottom. The same kind I used to place behind her ear every evening. For a moment, the world went quiet. My ears rang, my chest burned, and the floor beneath me seemed to vanish. I shouted her name again and again, but the house remained still. I rushed outside, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I checked the garden, the streets, the nearby park, but she was nowhere. Minutes turned into hours. I called her friends, her office, even her relatives. Nobody knew anything. By evening, the police were at my door. They asked questions, 100 of them. And all I could do was stare blankly, clutching that letter like it was the last piece of her I had left. Night fell, and I sat in the same spot by the window, waiting. Every sound outside made my heart jump. Every passing car made me hope she'd walk through the door. But she never did. And as the clock struck midnight, I realized she was gone. 2 days passed, and every hour felt like a lifetime. Sleep had abandoned me completely. The house that once echoed with her laughter now felt like a grave, silent, cold, and suffocating. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume still lingered in the air, but she was gone, leaving behind only questions that had no answers. The police kept asking if we had fought, if there was something she was hiding, or if she'd been in touch with someone recently. I told them the truth. We were fine. We were happy. At least, I thought we were. One evening, an officer came by with a small plastic bag. Inside it was her bracelet, the one I'd gifted her on our first anniversary. They'd found it near the old Riverside Bridge. My heart stopped. "Did you find her?" I asked, barely able to breathe. The officer hesitated. "Not yet. But there are footprints leading down toward the water. We think she might have—" "Don't say it!" I shouted before he could finish. "She's not dead." "She can't be." He looked at me with quiet pity, then left me standing there, shaking. That night, I went to the bridge myself. The moonlight shimmered over the dark water. I stood there for hours, staring into the depths, calling her name over and over until my throat burned. "Zoya, please come back. I can't live without you." But only the sound of water replied. Days turned into weeks. The police eventually stopped searching. Friends stopped calling. Everyone said the same thing. "She's gone. Accept it." But how do you accept losing the very heartbeat of your life? I couldn't. So I kept searching on my own. I visited hospitals, shelters, temples, even faraway towns, asking strangers if they had seen her. Every time I thought I saw a glimpse of her in a crowd, my heart would leap, only to shatter again when it wasn't her. Then, one rainy evening, I got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Mr. Aram?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I replied quickly. "Who is this?" "I work at the City Mental Health Center," she said. "We have someone here. She doesn't remember her name, but she keeps repeating your address. We found your number in her pocket." My heart stopped. "What did you say?" "She was brought here 3 days ago." "She seems fragile. Could you please come?" I didn't even wait to hang up properly. I grabbed my keys and drove through the rain like a madman, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like a curse. When I reached the hospital, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The nurse led me down a narrow corridor, past rooms with dim lights and quiet murmurs. "She's in here," the nurse said softly, opening the door. And there she was, sitting on a hospital bed, wearing a pale blue gown, staring blankly at the wall. Her once bright eyes looked lost, her hair tangled, her hands fidgeting nervously with the bedsheet. For a moment, I couldn't move. Tears blurred my vision. "Zoya!" I whispered. She turned slowly, her gaze empty at first, and then her eyes widened. A faint smile appeared on her lips, trembling. "You came," she said in a broken voice. I fell to my knees beside her bed, holding her hands tightly, as if afraid she'd vanish again. "Of course I came. I'll never let you go again." She began to cry softly. And so did I. In that small, silent room, surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and rain, I realized something I hadn't before. Love doesn't die when the person disappears. It stays alive in every heartbeat, every breath, waiting for the one moment when it can find its way back home. The first few days in the hospital were the hardest. She barely spoke. Sometimes she would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, clutching her head and crying, saying things that didn't make sense, fragments of fear, guilt, and confusion. The doctors said she was suffering from severe trauma and depression, that her mind had shut down to protect itself. I didn't leave her side. Day and night, I sat by her bed, holding her hand, whispering to her even when she couldn't respond. I told her stories, our stories, about how we met, our first trip, how she used to laugh when I burned the toast every morning. I spoke as if she remembered everything, even when she didn't react. Sometimes she would just stare at me for hours, her expression blank, like a child lost in a world she couldn't understand. But other times, when I touched her face or said her name softly, a flicker of recognition would pass through her eyes. Those tiny moments gave me strength to keep going. The doctors suggested therapy, medication, and patience. Lots of patience. And I gave her all of it. I fed her, read to her, even brushed her hair when she couldn't do it herself. Each strand felt like a thread tying her back to life. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the window, I was telling her about our wedding day. How nervous I had been when she walked toward me in that ivory dress. She blinked slowly, her lips moving. "You dropped the ring." I froze. Her voice was soft but clear, the first real words she'd spoken in weeks. "Yes," I said, choking on emotion. "I dropped the ring." "And you laughed at me." Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "You looked so scared." I smiled through my own tears. "I still am." Scared of losing you again, that day was the beginning of her return. Week by week, she improved. Her laughter returned, faint at first, then brighter. She began recognizing the nurses, asking about home, about our cat, about my work. The doctors were amazed. They said love can sometimes heal where medicine cannot. After 2 months, she was discharged. I brought her home, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, the house came alive again. She walked slowly through each room, touching the furniture, the photo frames, the walls, as if she was rediscovering her own world. When she reached the bedroom, she stopped in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a long time. "I look different," she said softly. "You look beautiful," I replied, standing behind her, meeting her eyes in the reflection. She turned, tears glistening in her lashes. "I don't deserve you." I placed my finger gently on her lips. "You don't get to decide that." Love isn't about deserving. It's about staying, no matter how broken things get. She threw her arms around me, sobbing quietly against my chest. I held her as tightly as I could, afraid that if I let go, she'd disappear again. That night, we sat together by the window, watching the stars, the same way we used to in our early days. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I thought you'd hate me for leaving." "I never hated you," I said. "I just hated the silence you left behind." For the first time in months, peace settled in the house. No tears, no screams, no shadows. Just two souls quietly finding their way back to each other. And somewhere deep inside, I thanked God for giving me a second chance to hold her again. Months passed. Slowly, life began to find its rhythm again. Morning tea, shared laughter, walks in the park. All the small, ordinary things that had once been lost began to return. But even though she smiled more often now, I could still see traces of pain in her eyes. the kind that never really goes away. Sometimes she would go quiet suddenly, lost in thought. I never asked what she was remembering. Some memories, I learned, are too heavy to touch. One day, during a therapy session, her doctor called me in privately. "There's something you should know," he said. "She's been writing letters." "Letters?" I repeated, confused. He nodded. "To herself. It helps her face what she's been hiding." That night, when she was asleep, I found a small notebook under her pillow. My hands trembled as I opened it, not out of curiosity, but fear. The first page read, "I thought ending my life would end my pain. I didn't realize it would pass that pain to the one who loved me most." I stopped breathing. The night I left, I wasn't running away from him. I was running away from myself. I felt unworthy of his love, guilty for being broken. I thought if I disappeared, he'd be free from me. Tears blurred the words. But when I saw his face at the hospital, something inside me healed. I realized love doesn't demand perfection. It forgives. It waits. It saves. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my heart. Every word was a wound, but also a miracle. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She had left because she loved me too much to let me watch her break. The next morning, as she made breakfast, I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist, just like I used to. She laughed softly. "What's this for?" "For finding your way back," I whispered. "For teaching me what love really means." She turned, her eyes shining. "And what does it mean?" "That even when everything falls apart," I said, "two hearts that belong together always find their way home." She smiled, and in that smile was everything: forgiveness, faith, and the quiet strength of love that had survived death itself. Years later, whenever I look at her, sitting by the same window where I once waited in despair, I silently thank God for mercy, for giving me back the person I thought I'd lost forever. Because love isn't about never losing each other. It's about losing, breaking, healing, and choosing each other again. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of love of all. The end.